What is it to connect? What does it mean for each of us as individuals? It's been hijacked through modern life, hijacked by technology, and the use of the word to describe information and communication access via the internet and cellular coverage. I propose we start a revolution to reconnect, personally, actively, with the intent to change the world we live in. How? By listening to and sharing of personal, authentic stories without agenda. Every day I tune into radio and television and I hear about countries in turmoil, war, political divide, death, poverty, as well as anxiety, depression, and yes, suicide. We can overcome the fear and the distrust that divides us simply by opening up and sharing our stories with people and about place, taking ourselves where we feel like we belong, connected, and of course, ultimately, optimistic and empowered. I get the feeling that might be why you're here today, to actually be inspired and feel connected. We've never been more virtually connected in human history, and yet so isolated by our social disconnect. And I think that it's been to great benefit, but also great detriment. Research has shown that millennials are the most anxious and depressed generation to date. Now let's think about that for a moment. Politically disengaged, confronted by increasing suicide rates, displaced refugees, fake news, and even social media. It's a tragic misnomer, and I'll come back to that thought shortly. Historically, the way we understand the world and our place in it is through narrative, whether that be the fairy tales we're told as children, the facts that we're taught through our education years, or the traditional and cultural stories we share between family and friends. I think you'll agree the main narrative we're fed via the 24/7 news cycle and online is less than positive. And I'm not saying there aren't inspiring stories, but you really have to be selective to find them. In my lifetime, yes, it's longer than 25 years, I was hoping to pull the wool over your eyes today, we've seen men on the moon, we have seen the internet being developed through the World Wide Web, the Industrial Revolution, and the selfie evolution, complete with accessories. I never ever thought I'd have to explain FOMO to my aging parents. But that's just one fear that my children would have to navigate. My childhood was simple by comparison. My brother and I, on our push bikes, would roam the neighbourhood to our heart's content. We'd play cricket in the street. Yes, with traffic. Well, there wasn't as much, I presume. We'd also explore the bush, all without a text or a phone call from our mother telling us to come home at dark. At age 12, I was actually coming out of being in business with my parents for 5 years. From the age of 7, I was exposed to people of all ages and all backgrounds through my family's businesses. Communicating at the counters, on the telephones. So I suppose that exposure has enabled me to be where I am today. Now, by the age of 12, after all of that experience, I was sent to boarding school and I was living independent from my family in Brisbane. You can imagine being disconnected from your family at such a tender age, and I'd only come home 3 times a year. Not only that, it was run by nuns. And I know some of you have only just met me, but I'm pretty sure you get the idea I had attitude. A precocious child, yet yearning to be loved and accepted, because at the heart of it, we just want to belong. Belonging is something that's fundamental to our being. I look back at those years and I see them as a catalyst to the curious nature I have being unleashed on these unsuspecting co-boarders trying to establish that connection. The need to love and be loved. Telling someone I loved them was foreign to me until boarding school. I still recall the sounds of my friends on their phone calls telling their parents and their family, "I miss you, I love you." Strange, I don't know what's going on the other end of the phone, but I remember the silence that I was actually greeted by. It went on for way too long until eventually I got a "you too." And to this day, that is the standard response to me telling my parents, "I love you." So I think it's just an Aussie thing. Do you think it might be just an Australian thing? I know that I envy other cultures, Italians, Greeks, Europeans, even Asian families who reach out and cherish that bond through physical contact, love and affection, hugging and kissing. In 2012, I travelled to Africa, visiting Zambia to film a documentary. For 3 days, we actually camped in a remote village surrounded by traditional mud brick huts and some of the happiest people I've met in my life. Yet they had very few possessions and little to no money. They had something greater than that. They belonged and they had community. They were connected in everyday life, whether it be cooking, farming, building, even participating in sport and faith. They did it together as a community, not just families, but as community. So what makes Western or modern society so different? Is it the loss of community? The growth of cities? Fear and distrust propagated by media and politicians? Could it be screen time versus FaceTime? Oh, I actually don't mind FaceTime if it's on your phone. It's preferable to plain screen time. Or could it be shame? Brene Brown set out to research connection. She found fear and shame consistently inhibited our ability to be vulnerable enough to truly connect. Beliefs, suspicions, and even assumptions mean we question everything we hear and see, shaping our perceptions of the world. Can we really trust the person telling the story? Social media publishes fake news. Revelation? Not really. Superficial communication will always equal superficial connection. In a world bombarded by contrived marketing messages and images of perfection, is it any wonder we're so disconnected? Nobody can live up to that, and many will live unhappy and unfulfilled trying. I once worked in commercial media and radio and television advertising, promotions and sales. Creativity was the one thing I relied on in sales, creating catchy commercials to give the best value package to my client. Unfortunately, most of the people didn't really value my values. So my bosses weren't actually invested in the types of selling tools I was using, including the focus on client detail, success, and just the bottom dollar. So, a bit dismayed by that, I resigned and started my own consulting business. Months later, I ran into a former colleague who asked me if I'd like to have another career in radio. You see, I had to leave marketing behind because it's designed to help you believe that you will be happier, sexier, stronger, richer, and even be more popular if you buy the products they're selling. My new career in radio wasn't exactly around sales and marketing. It was with the Australian Broadcasting Corporation. And when I was invited to apply, I was horrified. Me, a rock chick, working for the station my retired parents listened to? I thought about it for a moment. I handed in my card and said, why not? How wrong I was. At the age of 41, I found myself in my niche. I'd found my purpose in life. Interviewing people about subjects I had no clue about and talking to people who were complete strangers. Bring on the conversation. Not only that, I believed I could change the world one story at a time. Something I would tell my boss, Craig, on a regular basis. His reply, that's not your job. I did it anyway. You can call it a community bonus. We can all connect and reconnect by asking questions, actively listening, and sharing our experiences without agenda. For approximately 90% of you, this will be extremely daunting. It will take courage to overcome your fear and or shame. It was during the first 6 years as an interviewer that I realised the power of interest in connecting people, often complete strangers, something that Dale Carnegie knew all about. One conversation really stands out to this day, and it was quite a while ago. I was talking to a young researcher in an interview situation. After the interview, he started sharing his passion for birds, which was completely unrelated to his field of expertise or the interview we'd just had. So I seized the moment to ask him if he'd heard about Peter Doherty and his book, Sentinel Chickens. You see, deployed all around the world aren't only chickens, but other birds, who are our first line of defence in detecting viruses and bacteria. He said he hadn't. So I said, I'll send it to you. He must have thought I was completely crazy. Months later, having not heard whether he'd received the book, I decided to call him up again. Yes, he had, and he loved it. For me, we'll always be connected by that experience, and his connection to Peter's work may very well have changed something about his own life. How often are you interested in other people? The ones you encounter every day, your child's teacher, the chemist, perhaps a doctor in your life, or even your hairdresser. In February this year, I had an unfortunate incident. I tripped jumping onto a stage and lacerated my lower leg to the bone. Yeah, cringeworthy, hey? When I went to the hospital, I was treated by a young doctor. Now, she hadn't had experience with a wound like mine, and I was going to share a video so you could see the extent of it. However, I was overruled due to its graphic content. I even tried to slip a photo in there the other day. That didn't work either. She decided to consult an orthopaedic surgeon who just happened to be on duty that day. An older gentleman. I inquired as to why he'd chosen to specialise as an orthopaedic surgeon. I still didn't understand how he'd come to be in a public hospital. He told me one of the most amazing stories I've ever heard. How he had come from Rhodesia, now Zimbabwe, and his experience, his first foray into medicine, was treating wounds of people in a battlefield. Landmines, bombs and guns. He knew his way around orthopaedic surgery, I can tell you. And I was so grateful to have him treating my mere flesh wound. Not only that, the young doctor, who was quite new obviously to these situations, got the best mentoring she could have ever wished for, and a great story to boot. How little we know. Well, maybe you. I pry into people's lives at every opportunity, and they don't seem to mind. In fact, most people are more than happy to tell you what they think and how they feel. These stories that I've told you today, and the others you've heard shared by speakers, are just a few out of the many, thousands, even millions of stories that you will hear if you're simply interested. Social media is cited as a playground for pedophiles, a recruiting platform for fringe groups, and, of course, causes. It's also the bane of modern society, according to my mum, and the downfall of a generation. That's all the negative perceptions. But for social media, not just the platforms we all use, every single one is also a place of celebration, information sharing, and of course, all those positive things that you can find in a community: support, sharing, connection. You choose what you share, whom you connect with, and the depth of information you want to allow other people to know about you. We can all influence world peace. Inquire, listen, understand, and share stories purposefully with the intent to connect. The power of one to influence many. Now that's an idea worth spreading.